Hi and welcome to School Shorts with me, Melissa Chan-Green, journalist and mum of two with an interest in education. And we have some fascinating new findings in this episode with Elaine Reese, who has been involved in some groundbreaking studies, all beginning here in New Zealand, the Dunedin study and the Growing Up in New Zealand study. These have implications for children's development all around the world, but especially around oral language development. This is Elaine's area of speciality, and she has been working with many ECEs across the country. But the budget here in New Zealand has just announced funding for that to be extended to many more. And so she joins us today to talk about the impact that oral language in the early years can have on a child's beginning at school and also the many years after. Well, Elaine, thank you so much for your time. And I did explain a little bit about your background there, but if you can just expand on your time with the Growing Up in New Zealand study specifically.
Well, thanks for having me, Melissa. I really appreciate it. And yes, I started working on the Growing Up in New Zealand study back in 2008, I believe, pretty soon after it started. And before we had recruited the cohort. So yeah, the cohort was recruited in 2009. So I have been working on it since then. I started as the early childhood education advisor, and I was also advising on children's oral language assessments.
Wow. And you must have learnt so much over that time. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary study. So amazing to be part of it from the beginning.
It truly is. It is just groundbreaking in so many ways. And I feel like we've learned so much about children's development in New Zealand, but many of the findings apply internationally as well.
Okay, so we'll come to some of that, but can you just explain then how Kia Tumata Pai also came about? Was it as a result of working with this study?
Oh, yes, that's really interesting. It wasn't directly as a result of the Growing Up in New Zealand study, but you may have heard of the Dunedin longitudinal study. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm based in Dunedin. And Richie Poulton, who was the director of the Dunedin study, was in my department in psychology at the time. And he had been hearing about some of the results from Growing Up in New Zealand, and also thinking a lot about the results that were coming out of the Dunedin study about how important children's self-regulation was for the life course. Mm-hmm. And both the Growing Up study and the Dunedin study are longitudinal correlational studies, meaning that we're observing how children change over time and what are all the different factors. But we're not actually able to use that information with that cohort of children to help them. And so that's what Richie and I really wanted to do. And so with a whole team of people and funding from the Wright Family Foundation and collaboration with Best Start Educare, and we've also been working with Methodist Mission Southern to roll out the study in the early childhood centers, we were able to come up with Kia Tumata Pai.
And so is this actually taking the research a step further in terms of saying, well, this is what we know about what is important in terms of oral language development, and we're going to apply that, and we're going to see how that impacts the development of these children?
Exactly. And I had been working over the past 30 years on how parent-child and teacher-child interactions are supporting children's oral language and early literacy. And with some of my colleagues like Elizabeth Chauncey at University of Otago, we've been doing these smaller intervention studies to help children before they have problems, what's called preventive intervention. And so we were using that knowledge as well when we designed Kia Tumata Pai.
So what are the things then when we look at the oral language of those who are aged between 1 and 3, because that's where this new funding is going to be targeted? What is the significance of that group in terms of their oral language development?
It's such an important age for children's language development, those toddler years from 1 to 3, because we know that their language is changing incredibly dramatically. And you would notice that as a parent, toddler teachers notice that. Sometimes they're learning up to 10 new words a day.
Wow.
And so it's just really important to support their language at that time of rapid development. And we know that what's really important are those sensitive, everyday, back and forth interactions between adults and very young children. We are noticing what they're looking at or interested in, and you're talking about that. Whether it's a book that you're reading together or watching an airplane in the sky, there's so many ways to have those everyday interactions. And so that we knew that had to be the basis of the ENRICH oral language program for young children.
Because you're in a position where you're able to, I guess, see then as those children progress, are you seeing the differences yet, or is it too early to know the difference in those children who have really had this targeted oral language support to how they are achieving and how their oral language has developed, say, a few years later?
Yes, I'm very excited to be able to say that we are getting positive results of the ENRICH program at age 3. So we have just finished analyzing this massive data set with 1,481 children, over 1,800 teachers, following them up from approximately age 1.5 to 3. And half of them were in centers that received that ENRICH intervention program, and half of them were in active control centers where we were providing a different program to the teachers that was actually on childhood nutrition. And we are seeing benefits for the children in those ENRICH centers at age 3 on their oral language, but also for their self-regulation and their early literacy and their social skills. So we are writing up those findings right now, and we just finished presenting them at an international conference in Minneapolis, a child development conference.
Now, interesting you say their impact on self-regulation. So what's the relationship here between oral language and self-regulation? And I guess maybe we should probably explain a little bit about what self-regulation is for those who aren't used to that term.
Exactly. So I'll start there. We're defining self-regulation as thinking, doing, and feeling skills. So cognitive, behavioral, emotional control. So it does include things like being able to pay attention, having persistence at a task. So that's the thinking, cognitive side. The doing side is being able to wait to take your turn at a game, waiting for food to be served before you grab it off the table. And of course, the feeling or emotional side, I think we're all pretty well aware of with toddlers. It would be, and this is part of an example of how language is so important, because some of it is using your words instead of your hands or your feet to express.
Or just a simple scream, it's kind of still using your voice, but maybe not your words.
Yes. So being able to refrain, being able to calm yourself down, and even from a very young age. And so
you're finding 3-year-olds, there is a marked difference in 3-year-olds being able to express themselves and maybe prevent tantrums because of their oral language ability.
Yes. And that was actually our guiding theory all along, that those oral language skills would help children's self-regulation. And that's why we started with the ENRICH oral language program. There's another self-regulation program, my colleague Dione Healy's ENGAGE program, that we have started using with the children in the preschool ages from 3 to 5. But this first phase, we wanted to just really get those oral language skills solid. And we were hoping that it would spill over to their self-regulation and the other skills, but we weren't sure that that would happen. So we're delighted that it is.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, I guess, noticing what a child between 1 and 3 is interested in and expanding on the vocabulary that you can use with them when you're talking about that, can you give us an example, and can you give us some ways in which you have been doing that with children in these centres that parents could also do at home?
So the ways that we've been using with the ENRICH program are focusing on oral language. They're not specifically focusing on self-regulation, but part of it is talking about emotions, talking about, say, the emotions of the characters in the books and how that relates to the child's own emotions, the child's own experiences. That's actually a really important part of ENRICH, is to link it to the children's personal experiences. I actually come from a basic science background in autobiographical memory development was where I started. And looking at how very young children remember their experiences and how parents can support those memories in the way that they talk. And that's actually where this research in part came from, applying that to teachers, because we know that especially with toddlers, talking about these things in the abstract just doesn't work. But toddlers love to talk about their own experiences, about themselves. And so
I know a lot of adults are like that too, but it starts at toddlerhood. Are you saying?
Oh yes. That's when they first start talking about their experiences and their memories, their past experiences.
Interesting. So yeah, that I guess when we're adults, we think, oh, we can't really remember anything, younger than I don't know. It will be different for different people, but yeah, when you think about young children and toddlers, they do remember,
Yes, they do.
I guess those things.
Exactly, and
is that important for their memory growth as a whole?
Oh, definitely. And that's actually what I started studying 30 years ago in my first Marston grant from the Royal Society, was about toddlers' earliest memories as they're having the experiences, and how parents can support that. And so it was a basic science research project that has turned into applied research in a way that is just so gratifying to me as a parent and as a researcher, to see this work being translated out into ways that teachers and parents can use.
How early do toddlers remember? How long ago, how early are their memories?
Gosh, it's incredibly early. So you may have heard of Harlene Haynes' work on infant memory, and that was also done in New Zealand, in fact, here in Dunedin. And she and her students, like Rachel Barr, they showed that from as young as 6 months, using nonverbal memory techniques, obviously babies can't tell us what they remember, but using these clever techniques, they can show that even 6-month-old babies can remember over a couple of days at the very beginning, but they can remember specific events that have happened. And then by the time they're 1.5, they can talk about those experiences.
Wow. I just want to jump back to the building vocabulary and building that oral language with young children. I think sometimes, I don't know, just from my own experience, one of my children, for example, I will talk to her and I'll be saying all of these words that she's not repeating back. So I'm not actually sure with how much of this is being absorbed, or and then it might be months later that she'll say that word. So, do we know anything about that, and the importance, I guess, of using words even when you're not sure that they're understanding or using them back to you?
Yes, there's a whole separate field of research on children's word learning that's absolutely fascinating. And of course, you do need to use words that they don't know, or they're never going to learn them. So the simple answer is yes, you absolutely have to use words they don't know. But the way that works best is if you use them what we call contingently. So in that example I just gave you, if say a toddler is looking up at the plane in the sky and pointing, and at the very beginning they might just be saying dat and pointing. And so then if you use the word plane while they're looking at it, while they're interested, that is a very powerful way of teaching them new words. And you're right, it may not show up at the very beginning, or they may start doing the classic thing where they start calling all moving objects planes for a while. And that's completely normal, and it's just a way that they're figuring out the category.
Yeah. In terms of the funding and the work that's going on in ECEs, how is it different to what a lot of ECEs might be doing already? Like, are ECEs not already talking about emotions and that sort of thing with the young people there?
That's I think that's the beauty of Kia Tumata Pai, because we are building on so many things that early childhood educators are already doing, but we're helping them to do it in a more structured and reflective way. And for instance, I went out to visit a center, an ENRICH center, and so we introduced the concept by using the serve and return terminology that we didn't create, but it's known pretty much around the world now. And one of the teachers said, wow, it's just, we were already doing serve and return, but we didn't know what it was called. And there's something about having a label for it and knowing that it's important. It helps give you, or give the educators, the freedom to spend time on that, and to spend that extra time with a toddler when I know they have so many other things they could be doing. But just to have a short, slightly longer back and forth conversation can make huge differences for toddlers' language development.
Yeah, and I guess that's the same for parents too. A lot of parents would be sitting with their child and say, look, there's a bus and the bus is going fast, or the bus is moving slowly, or the bus is stopped and the bus is red, and all sorts of things like that. But I guess as parents, we don't know the terms or necessarily the reasons or the impact that has.
And we definitely have noticed that with what we call these reminiscing or memory conversations, is that parents are doing it a couple of times an hour, but they're not aware of it. And they're not aware of how important it is for the children's language development, their emotion understanding. There are all these positive spin-offs of having not just strong memories, but also the ability to articulate things that have happened to you. And I've done research, other longitudinal studies, where I followed up the kids from toddlers to age 21, and it makes a difference for the way they tell their life stories, and it also creates higher self-esteem and fewer emotional problems as teenagers and young people. So it has incredible long-term impact. And so part of it was telling the teachers how important these everyday interactions are that they were probably almost certainly already having.
Wow. Amazing that it can have that impact so many years on, and so cool that there are so many crossovers in the other studies that you're involved in too, that you can actually track that and actually mark that. That's such an important part of it. Your reaction to the funding that has been given to ECEs to develop this and what impact you think that's going to have?
Oh, I'm absolutely thrilled, especially because we are getting these positive findings. So we do know that it's working. It's evidence-based. And we will continue exploring, figuring out the finer points of the Kia Tumata Pai study and learning from it as we now roll it out with the help of Jimmy McLaughlin at Methodist Mission Southern, to roll it out to over 500 early childhood centers over the next 4 years. So we're just thrilled to be able to take this out to more early childhood centers.
And what does it tell us, do you think, about, when we think about the equity gap, and that's not just here in New Zealand, it's something a lot of countries struggle with, when you see children starting on such different footing at the beginning of their school journey. What significance do you think this has if we just learnt more either at home or in the ECE setting about how we can really, develop all children to be able to start on with that advantage?
I mean, that is my dream, and that's why we're starting at such a young age, because we know that toddlers' language skills already from that young age are such a strong predictor of how they're going to do in reading and maths, academic achievement, as well as self-regulation. So that's why we knew we had to start so early. And what we're seeing, and I'm so excited to be able to tell you this, that we're seeing even stronger benefits of ENRICH for those children who are coming from low-income or middle socioeconomic status families than for children who are coming from more privileged backgrounds.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and I think so useful for people to bear in mind in terms of the importance of the school journey and where you really invest in a child, right, to set them up, and where you can make a huge difference. And I guess it's also quite a good reminder for parents that sometimes just that time in talking to your child is so beneficial. We're all so busy and we rush around and you buy the toys and you think that'll keep them occupied for a bit.
Exactly.
But sometimes it's that sitting and talking.
I think if as a parent, and now my two are in their 20s, and I think it's so much harder for parents these days with so many other things to distract, especially screen time issues. But the research does show that taking that time to share books together, and one thing I wanted to say that's very important for parents when they share books with toddlers is you don't have to get through the whole book. So just even focusing on a page or two and just having that back and forth interaction could be far more beneficial than making your child sit still to get through to the end of the book. And that's one reason I think ENRICH is working, is that we have basically given the teachers permission to just talk about a page or two of the book. And I think it feels like a huge relief to them to know that even those little, what we call pockets of time, can make a huge difference.
I have to say that's a huge relief to me, because I had one child who would just sit and let me read book after book after book, and another one, and she's off after a couple of pages. And I think, and here I am doing a podcast about how important it is to read books to kids. And I think I can only get through a few pages and then she's off, and then I'll coax her back and I'll do another few pages. So that's very encouraging to hear.
I have to say that's the exact same pattern with my two boys. So
good.
I actually developed some of these techniques through practice first and then tested them.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? Every child is so different, but good to know that you can build the oral language skills without needing to sit there for hours with a book.
We have these we have filmed some of the teachers with the children, And one little video clip I'm thinking of is just beautiful, where there's this little girl sitting quietly while the teacher's reading the book. But then there are these two little boys going back and forth, and she's keeping them involved in the interaction. And there's lots of physical stuff going on, like lots of high fives. And that's keeping them, she's not making them sit still and listen. And I think that's part of why it's working.
Wow. Well, our teachers are doing a wonderful job in those ECEs.
Yes, they are.
I've seen it myself. And Elaine, I want to thank you for the work that you've done with this study, and exciting that it gets to be rolled out to many more ECEs. So thank you so much for your time and for your work.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on your show. Thanks.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If that topic was helpful for you and you'd like to hear more, please do like and subscribe. It sends me that feedback. School Shorts is all about supporting busy parents who want their children to thrive. Follow on social at School Shorts NZ for fun ideas, helpful resources, and exclusive giveaways.